Well, I'm happy to do that. Okay, well, welcome everybody to World's Greatest Kiwanis Club online today on Thursday. Um, Greg, you want to go ahead and start us with the thought for the day?
Sure. Sure. March the 6th, 2025. I thought a couple quotes about what's easy and what's right. What's easy and what's right to do. Eventually, we must choose between what is easy and what is right. That comes out of Harry Potter, the Goblet of Fire. And as a practicality, a couple of quotes relating to what is easy and what is right. Harrison Ford said at the 2018 Indianapolis Prize, "For me, protecting nature is a moral imperative, and that's what's right." And lastly, the only way to prove you are a good sport is after you lose. Ernie Banks. What's right? What's easy? Thank you. Have a good day.
All right, I always like to hear a Cub quote.
Greg.
It's good deal. Good thought. Thanks for that. Hopefully by now everybody has saved the third Thursday every month on your calendars for our Columbia Club lunches. Again, we're up on the 10th floor most of the time with the Zoom options on the first and second Thursdays, along with lunch, brunch, and social supper options to connect in person those weeks. And then we'll look for some additional opportunities to meet at a nonprofit for breakfast, lunch, or project during the fourth weeks of the month. But here are some of the highlights. Monday, the 10th of February is the next, or sorry, March. Moving forward here, get the right month. Lunch bunch at Iozo's, RSVP to Roger if you can join on the 10th. Thursday, the 13th of March is Interclub with Kiwanis of Northwest Indianapolis at New Hope, Indiana at 86th and Michigan. They meet early from 7:30 to 8:30 a.m. with donuts and coffee, followed by a speaker. In this case, Shane Wilson, Kids Count Therapy. There will also be a Zoom option for those who are interested. But I guess you miss the donuts if you do that. Got to buy your own. Thursday, the 20th, lunch at the Columbia Club. And then tomorrow is the final day for the Indiana District Mid-Year Conference in Carmel on Saturday, the 22nd. The keynote speaker is from the Indiana Youth Institute, as we'll be presenting a check to Riley for the Reach Out Indiana campaign, as well as a contribution to the 1925 fund for the Key Club Centennial. Thursday, the 27th, will be the 79th annual IHSAA Boys Basketball Finals lunch at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. For those of us that were at the women or the girls basketball finals, it's a fun event, and I'm sure that one will be terrific. And then Thursday, April 10th, William Wozniak with Invest In about college financial aid will be a speaker. So, Mary, you want to talk about our lunch bunch or our social supper last evening? Is Mary not on? I know I can speak firsthand that we had a good group and had a really nice opportunity to get together and catch up with some people we haven't seen for a while. And Oakley's was always has terrific food. Highlight of which was a shrimp corn dog. So, I can update about the basketball. Or is there anything else you want to share? Um, okay, update about the basketball. Last week's lunch celebrating the 50th anniversary of Indiana Girls Basketball Championship. And we had a big surprise. Indiana Fever number 10 guard Lexi Hall stopped by for a quick interview on stage by Greg Rakestraw. The Pacers and the Fever sponsored the entire IHSAA tournament as well as our lunch. Brian Hainchen from the Indy Star joined us, as well as Indiana's first Miss Basketball, Judy Warren, and she got a great ovation. It was a fun event. Laura Berry presented the $1,500 academic MVP scholarship to Annie McAllister from Bishop Chatard girls basketball. The coach shared Annie Mack is a great person, and we have no doubt she'll be successful in whatever path she takes in the future. Mac was always willing to do whatever was needed for the good of the team. Hardworking, tough, and reliable. It's been an absolute pleasure to coach her. So that was and I can speak that her parents were terrific as well. So we had the good fortune of having Annie at our Kiwanis table, and she's terrific. So it's very encouraging to see. Laura, can you update on the DLC?
I sure can. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So as you know, we sponsor some amazing service leadership program clubs, and our key clubs really did a great job at the district leadership conference over the weekend, including our new Indiana district governor from Shortridge High School, Sweet Knight, and you can see the photo there. An amazing election that she ran and won. So we also have lieutenant governors from clubs that we sponsor. We have Lauren Strode from the Indy Metro Division as a lieutenant governor. She's from Speedway High School. The Perry Meridian High School's Dylan Crosby is now the Rose Division lieutenant governor. And from Perry Meridian High School as well, we got a Distinguished Treasurer Award for Vedika Sharma. She has done a great job as treasurer this year, which is a big job, as I'm sure Roger can tell you. We also, Shortridge High School got the Distinguished Service Project Award for their community closet and food pantry, which is outstanding. I was honored to receive the Distinguished Kiwanis Advisor Award, which was a great surprise to see. And Shortridge High School also took home the Traditional Scrapbook Award. That scrapbook was shiny, sparkly, colorful, all the amazing things, as well as it encapsulated all of their great service and leadership throughout the year. So lot to celebrate here from the weekend.
Cool.
Excellent.
Very cool.
How about a big round of applause for Laura?
Eric,
She's
Yeah.
been a great
Eric-
job with kids for a long time. And she helps
Eric,
me
we want
through the other ones.
Eric-
Thank you.
Eric, it's Greg. Hello.
Yeah,
Hello.
Greg, what's up?
We need to send a note to Sweet Night and
Oh,
and to
absolutely.
Shortridge High School for what's the closet and the achievements and the scrapbook. I know Roger and I were thinking about doing that as their co-sponsors, but I think it needs to come
Absolutely.
from the club.
Absolutely.
We got to get that, and we can deliver it in care of Shortridge. Annie, we're going to go down there next Monday, but that's a fantastic achievement.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, a couple of other notes besides Laura. We wanted to thank the foundation who supported the DLC attendance for nearly 40 students and 2 advisors. We had 9 students from Tech and 1 advisor. Speedway sent 9 students as well. Prairie Meridian, where did they end up, Laura? You know how many there were?
A total of 12, but a couple of them
okay.
were district officers.
Okay. And then Shortridge had 11 students. And this was for a weekend, last weekend. And I got a couple of great feedback already from Shortridge and Speedway. And as a matter of fact, I've got a note from Brian Passwire, who's the advisor at Speedway Ski Club. I'd like to read to you. It says, "We are incredibly grateful for your continued support and for all the opportunities your club allows our students to experience that wouldn't be possible without you. This has allowed our club to rebuild and grow these past 2 years beyond my optimistic expectations and hopes. Please convey our sincere and overwhelming gratitude to our members on Thursday meeting and today, which is today, I guess. And know that your club has made significant difference in the lives of our most needy students and will continue to make meaningful impacts with your support. So that was a note from Brian at Speedway. So money is being well spent. I think we're all glad to see these kids advance. This was a leadership conference, so they'll all be better students and adults because of what we're doing with these kids.
Absolutely.
That's
Sounds
all
like,
I've got, Eric.
yeah, more than 40 people, 40 students that we managed to help with that, which is terrific. So
And that's-
it is great to hear that it's appreciated and that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I think it's really grown over the last several years. Laura, when we had just Perry Meridian, there was 10 or 12 kids going, but now we've got 3. Speedway's become more active, and Tech and Shortridge are 2 new.
Shortridge. Yeah, no, it's awesome. And now we got the lieutenant or governor designate. So
Yes.
that's awesome.
Yep.
And we really couldn't do all of that without your help as well, Roger. You play an integral
Yeah.
role. I'll pass on my award to you for all of the work that you've done over the past few years, helping with those, get them off the ground, chartered, and attending events. So that's great.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Well, thanks to both of you guys. It's really, really encouraging to see that growing, and that's what we want to have happen.
Great.
Last month, we delivered grant checks totaling $58,000 to 13 community organizations that serve youth. Would anybody like to share their experience in delivering a grant check? Is anybody here who's been participating in that?
I can jump in first here.
All right.
I got to go to the Starfish Initiative and Tangram. And Starfish, that's right downtown. They have a great office, all new and shiny. They were just delighted to get this grant and couldn't tell us enough. I'm getting a little echo on my, I don't know if that's me or what. I don't know if you guys are hearing that too.
Yeah, no, I am. I think it's Art's microphone.
It looks
Oh.
like you were on 2 times, Laura, maybe.
I am, because I can't get my computer audio and I don't want to be on my camera on my phone. So I'm on my phone with audio and on my computer with camera. So
Okay.
sorry.
I think it's corrected now. Keep
Okay.
going.
So Starfish, they have, they would like to join us for a meeting at some time and give us an update from the inside, because there's so many things that they're doing. I can't begin to tell you all of the things, but their work with youth, giving them some guidance and support through whether that's like a job fair that they have or mock interviews where they practice. They help with how to do a LinkedIn page, all of those fun things. And then Tangram works with individuals with autism to provide support all the way through whatever is needed in terms, especially in terms of secondary education, higher education, and connecting them with services in schools, different programs to help families and individuals maximize their abilities. So those 2 were fantastic organizations to work with. And I did drop the Action Club pitch to Tangram because I thought they would be a perfect partner organization to work with. And maybe there would be some parents or employees there that would like to get some Action Club members going again. So yeah.
I also dropped off, made presentation check to the Indianapolis Public School Foundation Executive Director Stephanie Bailey and their foundation fundraiser advancement person, Kelly Riley. And They were also very much excited to receive the award from Kiwanis Foundation. They're using the funds to assist in the onboarding of student teachers by using the funds for background checks and field evaluations, that type of thing. So they and that was at their the IPS headquarters, which is just north of downtown.
Mhm.
So they, pardon me? Yeah, so they were also very excited to receive the grant funds.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. All right, Trina, were you going to introduce our speakers?
I would love to. It is my pleasure to welcome Amelia and Aleksandra from Chalkbeat. Super excited to have them here today and to hear all that they have to share with us. Chalkbeat is a nonprofit news organization committed to covering one of America's most important stories. The effort to improve schools for all children, especially those who have historically lacked access to quality education, because they believe that education is fundamentally a local issue. Coverage is rooted in our local communities. Amelia Pak-Harvey previously worked as a city reporter for the Indianapolis Star and as an education reporter for both the Las Vegas Review-Journal and the Lowell Sun in Massachusetts. She graduated from Boston University and is originally from North Carolina. Aleksandra Appleton was born in Serbia before moving to the United States at the age of 5. She grew up in California and then moved to New York for grad school. She started as an education reporter in Fresno, then covered Las Vegas before moving to Indiana in 2021. I can say I'm so grateful that they have both landed here in Indy and that they have taken the time to speak with us today. Ladies, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. We're equally excited to be here. My boss gave me a document to share with you all, which is ways that you can keep up with us. We're really all about getting news to people however they want to get it. We both run texting services. Mine is for State House updates, and Amelia does IPS school board meetings. We have a daily newsletter. We have regular articles, of course. So whatever way you want to read your education news, we'll get it to you. So I guess I'll start with my beat. I cover the State House, so right now is my really busy season. Obviously, we're following the property tax discussion and the school's budget, and then some other issues that I are dear to my heart that I'd be happy to go into, like revamping math education and putting in more supports for students who experience bullying. But before I do that, I'll let Amelia give her spiel too.
Hi, yes, so I'm Alex's counterpart and I cover Indianapolis public schools. And so I do dabble in the State House to the effect that it impacts Indianapolis specifically. And I didn't realize when I took this job, but it would also include coverage of the charter schools that are in Indianapolis as well, which there are quite a few. So I'm always kept busy.
We'd be happy to just open it up and have you guys ask questions, or we can each, go into like the things that we're interested in and we're following right now. Like I mentioned, one of mine is the math education bill that's moving through. It's sort of in the line of the science of reading, and it would put in a lot of the same things, like an early numeracy screener to be a equivalent of the early literacy screener, and not something we've had before, and something I've heard is really important to get an idea of students' math skills before they get to 3rd grade and start taking the iLearn, which right now is some of the first data we get about where students stand compared to each other. But also obviously has a lot of controversies, as all testing does for students, of is it too early? Is it too much stress too early? Things like, yeah, there it is. I'm excited about that one. I want people to read it and give me their opinions about it. There'd be a component for colleges and universities as well, that I think they may not be happy about because it requires a bit of intrusion, a bit of evaluation about whether they are teaching student teachers to teach math in the way that the state wants. Another thing is that Indiana might be the first to do something like this, which is unusual. We're not always the first to take a policy initiative. We weren't first to the science of reading, but we could be the first to the science of math if that's what we end up calling it.
And I also on my end, oh, I see Laura asked a question. Sorry, we can maybe address that.
Yeah, that has such a good story, and I wish my CEO was here to give her full spiel because it's so inspiring. But she was a reporter for a blog that she started. I think it was called Gotham Schools, right? In New York City. And she talks about being like a very young woman and going into big courtrooms and state board of ed meetings and introducing herself as the founder of this blog. And then getting some really, really good stories at the time, eventually growing the blog into a big website and then partnering with other similar initiatives in other cities to all kind of come under the umbrella of Chalkbeat. So that kind of founded the original bureaus. I think it was New York, Colorado, us, Philadelphia, something like that, right, Amelia? Yeah, yeah. And what piqued my interest, I guess I always wanted to work for Chalkbeat. I came out of grad school begging them for a job. They published some of my first stories, which were about students who had immigrated to New York City as unaccompanied minors in 2016 and 2017, and they were basically they were working in factories overnight and then attending high school the next day. That was the first story that Chalkbeat picked up of mine, and then I worked at newspapers for a few years, but and then eventually got this job.
Yeah, and I had a similar. I did not hear of. I think Chalkbeat was just getting started when I was starting reporting in 10 years ago now, 2014, and I kind of landed in the education beat in Lowell, Massachusetts, and it was just something that the editor at the paper, very old school newspaper print, just kind of assigned me one day in a meeting. And so I fell into that. And then from there, took a job in Vegas where Alex also worked. We used to have the same job, covering the Clark County School District. And from there came to Indy, really for the Indy Star, but kind of found my way back to education through Chalkbeat. So that's I love education because it has all of the components of politics and politicking just in a different light, not so much as Democrats versus Republicans, but politics in other ways, and also campaigning and elections, but also all of the different challenges that come with educating the city's youth. So it's just so much to cover, and there's a trove of stories to go through. So it's never really dull. And even in the summer, people always ask, what do you do when school is out? But you're just always working because there's always things to do. It doesn't slow down and to examine. So it's a great beat, I think.
Yeah, I always say that too. It's politics and money, and then when you get sick of that, there's also good stories to do about teachers and teaching and classrooms, so you don't have to feel like the world is all bad.
I have a presentation. Oh, Roger, you asked the future of charter schools. Yeah, I actually have a presentation that I frantically messaged Alex like 2 minutes before this call. I realized I gave a presentation to the Rotary Club about 2 years ago, and I just pulled it up and I dug it up, and I could present it to you all. It's a tiny bit dated, but the figures are still the same, and I think it still does set up the conversation we're seeing at the State House right now with this whole IPS versus charter discussion, which I'm guessing probably some of you have been following. I don't know if is that like
No,
yes?
I think that I'm curious to see that. Yeah.
Okay, great.
So you have co-host privileges right now to be able to do that, Amelia.
Okay, I'll share this Hopefully you see. Let's
Mhm.
Okay, so let's go ahead and I apologize again, this is a little bit dated. But it's kind of funny how it still holds true to this day. I don't know how to hit play on these things. So let's see. This kind of gives a background of
Let me try
where-
the slideshow button.
Slideshow button up there on the upper right.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, wonderful. Yes. So this kind of gives a background of where we're at, or where we were before this. These are the IPS boundaries. This is so of the districts that I've covered, Indianapolis is probably the most Vegas is the most depressing. Indianapolis is probably interesting because of our choice environment. I've never seen anything quite like it. I've also never seen a city where there's Democrats that wholeheartedly embrace choice. So that's quite new to me. In Massachusetts, it's a very blue state. Charters and were kind of a bad word, more or less, when I was there. And so this is just a completely different environment. It's been really fascinating to cover. So these are the IPS boundaries. So when we talk about Indianapolis schools, this might be sharing more than you guys realize, or more than what you already know, but there's township schools and then there's the inner city IPS school. So this is what I'm mainly talking about.
Mhm.
Let's see. This is a timeline that I think is important to, the district has presented this timeline repeatedly over and over again. I think the reason why they're doing it is to try and understand or show the reader why the history of where we've been and why we're in the state that we're in now necessarily. So we had Unigov and the federal desegregation order in 1970, and they begin busing students to townships. So you see the number of students gradually declined since, deseg all the way up to present day. Here we have, like, in 2000, the early 2000s is when the charter law passes. So there's charters that are being grown, and enrollment that is still significantly lower than it was, say, 40 years ago. So this is a really important slide. That enrollment has always been decreasing. It's not quite new. This is kind of synthesizing all of this of where we're at. Charter schools first opened in 2002. And 2014, the IPS former superintendent Louis Farabee helped negotiate the innovation schools law to it was kind of like a partnership or collaboration rather than something being done to IPS, is kind of how the district has characterized it in the past. And in 2015, the first innovation schools opened. This is an important part that I think is lost on a lot of people. There are innovation schools within IPS's network, right? Most of them are charter schools, all but maybe 4 or 5 of them are not charter schools, but they're innovation schools in the sense that they're autonomous and they don't need to follow specific rules of the district. So when you hear innovation and charters used interchangeably, it's almost interchangeable, but not quite. There are a few innovation non-charter schools like Edison School of the Arts that kind of get lost in the mix. And then most recently we had IPS closing the high schools. I think I did this presentation before Rebuilding Stronger and before they closed schools most recently. So this is kind of an overview of what innovation schools are. Again, they're not necessarily all charters, but the majority of them are. 32, I think right now we're at 33 innovation schools. These figures are a little bit dated. Most of them, like I said, are run by charter operators. There are 6 that are not charters: Cold Spring, Thomas Gregg. And this is kind of a funny thing to me, but under the state's innovation law, the district gets to count its innovation schools students and test scores as part of its own students and test scores. But in reality, no one actually does. The state still separates out charters and IPS, which is important when you kind of think about the fight that's going on right now. This is a historical perspective again of IPS enrollment, just showing how it's declined. So the orange was, I believe, when we had state takeover schools, and that got phased out. And the green is IPS innovation charter schools, I believe. And the blue should be, yes, innovation, the light blue should be those innovation schools that are not charters. Whoops, sorry, so this is actually something I'm working on right now. I don't know how frequently everyone's been following this session. I think what's most frustrating is that folks get up and speak in generalizations, and it's just so important. And I think that the both sides get dehumanized in this fight right now, and it's forget that what we're really talking about is students on all sides of the aisle. So I just want to throw that as a huge caveat. People cite certain studies, people cite what they've heard anecdotally, what they've seen in their schools. So it's extremely hard to answer this question. It's not as clear cut as people on both sides of the aisle would have you think, because there are, and this was mentioned yesterday in the hearing, there are underperforming charter schools and there are underperforming IPS schools. On the flip side, there are extremely high performing charter schools and high performing IPS schools too. So it's just really hard when you group it all together to do that. I singled out Paramount here because they're an example of a charter school that is high performing and it's held up to a high standard, I think, in the charter community. So this is also something that I'm working on right now, is the saturation of the market that we have. This is the IPS borders. These are different schools. Sorry, again, there's like a number of innovation charters, there's a number of independent charters, all in this colored space. And so I'm working on a piece that would examine, like, do we have too many schools, which I think the answer is clearly yes, but I just want to put a few numbers on it. This is all leading to an instability of the market, so to speak. So we've closed high schools, we've closed John Marshall, we just closed several schools from Rebuilding Stronger. We have chartered schools that open and close. Those charter schools also frequently report issues with low enrollment, which is part of my oversaturation piece. So there are a lot of, I think the downside of this on both sides is that there's just instability for the kids ultimately. And those are a few of the recently closed ones. And then this is a slide that I did on Rebuilding Stronger, which now might be a moot point if we end up proceeding with property tax sharing, which is highlighted in this next slide. When you hear that charters are funded on a lower property tax amount, they don't receive property taxes. Starting this year, they actually are going to receive, the charters in India are supposed to receive a portion of property taxes. That was from a state law actually passed 2 years ago. But it's not that much. So what the recent legislation in Senate Bill 518 is seeking to do is kind of give them the entirety of the property tax portion that they're kind of on a proportional basis entitled to. So this is kind of, there's a lot of figures again that you'll hear at the State House. This is one study that I was able to locate that really does show the disparity between how district schools are funded and charter schools are funded in terms of revenues. I don't know how, this is a little bit dated as well, but you frequently hear an 8,000 figure cited at the State House right now in terms of charter schools receive 8,000 less per pupil, and that's probably more or less in line of what you're seeing from this report. So they do, I think this reality still stands, that they hold solid sway in the state legislature, the charter advocacy groups, and we have a legislature that's very, pro school choice, so it's easy to see where that's going. these are dated slides from last session. So these are all a little bit dated, but the last slide I think still stands, which is what's in store for the future. And I kind of always envision an equilibrium of some sort. I don't know if that's a wrong hypothesis to have, but I'll stop sharing now. I kind of envision a city where there are a certain number of charter schools and a certain number of district schools, and once we right size and get rid of the saturation, i.e. close schools on, whether that's closing charter schools or district schools, maybe we reach some kind of equilibrium or homeostasis that's sustainable for the future. But I don't know if that stability will come anytime soon, just given how many schools there are and the battle over funding as it is right now. So I hope that helps. Sorry if I talk too long.
No. Can I ask a question about your first slide?
Yes,
Showing
sure.
the total number of students from 1970.
Yes. I'll pull that up again.
I don't know if I misread that. Was that like 80,000, 90,000 students in IPS?
I think that,
And now we're about 30, 35.
yes, we're in the 70s. There was about, in 1965, it hovered a little bit around 100,000.
Yeah.
And
So
then
it's a historical question, but do you know why that drops so much in the IPS area district?
my sense, and from reading some historical documents, is that because of busing, the busing mandate, and I'm guessing white flight from the center town
Right.
area.
Move to the suburbs. Yeah.
And so on top of the thing of the desegregation and the white flight, then there was forced busing of African American students to the townships, which caused the district to shrink even further because IPS was not following
Yeah.
federal deseg orders. So it was kind of a double whammy.
Yeah. Okay.
Just wanted to add to, I read when I was doing a story in the Martindale Brightwood neighborhood, some of the advocates were really specific about the construction of the 70, splitting that neighborhood in half and kind of like destroying it, so forcing people to move elsewhere, often outside of the city.
That's probably a good point. Thank you. It did make a difference.
Yeah, so that slide that was just shared maybe helped to answer my question about the size of the charter schools versus public. So, and then, but as you said, the innovation schools are really kind of part of IPS. So that looked like it made it like a quarter of the size of what IPS is trying to educate, the general group size.
Yes, it's let's see, the innovation schools are about, I can give you the enrollment. This is the enrollment as it's broken down it's more
Okay.
updated version, but the green is the innovation charters and the light blue are basically, if you consider all the blue coloring IPS schools, and if you consider the green coloring charters that are part of IPS. In addition to that, there's another number of independent charters that are not affiliated with IPS that also offer seats for kids. So this is just what IPS counts as enrollment. But when you see folks cite IPS enrollment, frequently they will just cite the figures in the blue.
In the blue, yeah.
Exactly, which is the 22,000 figure. IPS does get quite upset when you only cite that figure. They argue that when the innovation law was passed, they were supposed to be able to count charters, the IPS charters, as their own kids as well. But again, no one does that. No one does that for academic analyses either. I don't know if that was, kind of a concession that they were given that no one really has bothered to follow. But yeah, this is the breakdown now.
And the charter schools go all the way through 12th grade, right? So are they just through middle school? Okay, so they
can start, some of them offer pre-K, some of them are K through 5, K through 7, K through 8,
yeah.
9 through 12. We have a number of adult high schools. The Excel centers are technically charter. Crystal House has like a full range program from I think pre-K all the way. They also offer adult programming on site at the old Emmerich Manual High School. So it really varies depending on the school. It can.
And are what's the minimum number of students you can have to be in charter school versus just at some point you're homeschooling, right? So I just was kind of
That's
to be.
And actually Alex has done work on micro
They're
schools.
called micro schools now. Yeah, that's a new-ish thing, and it's something between a homeschool and a private school. And there was, for a time, they were hoping to have the state voucher program opened up to them so that a bunch of parents could join together, take a choice scholarship, and start a micro school.
Oh my gosh. Oh.
It doesn't seem like that's going to happen this year.
I have a question that I would like to ask. I'm just trying to like better understand the funding differences between IPS and charter schools, and what the differences are. Do you see a very similar per student average in funding between both schools, or is there a large discrepancy?
That's a really good question. I actually haven't done like my own per pupil analysis because it gets so hard in terms of what funds you want to count toward charters and toward IPS. So the charter sector would argue, and there is data to back this up, that there is a funding gap in terms of per pupil amounts because they don't receive property taxes. And IPS does receive property taxes, and that goes to their kids. So they don't receive that. On the other hand, charters do receive state funding through a charter grant of $1,400 per pupil to kind of make up for that lack of property taxes, although folks would argue that it doesn't make up for what, for example, IPS gets in property taxes. So I can pull up that slide again. There's just a number of, let's see, there's a number of different funds that you have to take into account. And it really just depends on which ones you're counting. This is that study.
And Amelia pointed out to me today that the property tax proposals would reduce the charter grant amount by the amount that the charter school would get from these property taxes. So it's almost a fallacy to call it a conversation about more money. It's about money being supplanted.
Yeah, to a certain extent, some of that money is being supplanted, and the state will not have to pay that parts of that charter grant that it's currently paying.
Interesting. And then kind of a follow-up question as well is do you see a difference in IPS versus charter schools in terms of teacher retention and satisfaction and salaries?
That's a good question. I actually haven't done that analysis either. And the problem is that I don't think the state tracks, or they might perhaps track retention, they just don't publish it. But in terms of retention and salaries, I'm not sure. I haven't done an aggregate comparison.
There's a difference, though, I want to say, in licensing, right, Amelia? There's different requirements for charter school teachers.
Yeah, they are required by state law to have at least, I think, 90% of folks licensed on site. And if not, then at least some of those, if not 90% licensed, then they need to be on their way to obtaining licensure. I might be butchering that state law. I'd have to double check, but there are some flexibilities in terms of licensure requirements. I don't have, and I am trying to get the data of licensure by school in Indianapolis to see what that looks like at the individual school level. But that kind of brings me to the concern that I have with it in all this discussion, is that it is to some extent helpful to have like an aggregate of charter school iLearn scores versus IPS iLearn scores, right? But again, in this fight that you're seeing at the State House, it's just kind of this dehumanizing, all charters are bad, all IPS schools are bad, all charters are great, all IPS schools are worth saving, and there's no nuance. And I think it largely depends on which IPS school you're at in terms of whether or not you're happy, right? Or as a teacher, which charter school you're at. I talked to teachers at charter schools that had bad experiences at one charter school, and then they have a great experience at the charter school they're at now, and they're very happy with their decision. So that it just, and then on top, compounding that, you have anecdotal stories that folks share, which, not to take away their experiences, but it's anecdotal. It is their experience at their specific IPS school or their specific charter school, but it doesn't necessarily apply to all of the other schools of that same type, if that makes sense. So
Well, I guess in aggregate, and I know you mentioned that, there's high performing IPS schools and high performing charters and low performing IPS and low performing charters, but in aggregate, has the school choice given our kids in aggregate a better education? Like, are we moving up in the national rank versus other states, or are we still sort of in the same place? And even though people have choice, generally as a whole, our students aren't getting any better educated, or are they? I guess that's is this competition between IPS and the charter schools resulting in better performance as a whole for the system? I guess is what I'm heading towards.
great question. My first instinct is to go to the national NAEP scores, but unfortunately they only measure math and reading scores. Alex reports on this for Indiana as a state. Some districts have individual district scores, like our old Vegas school district reported CCSD scores as a district, but we don't Indianapolis doesn't do that. So there's no way for me to measure on a national standardized benchmark to see whether our scores in reading and math have gone up or down for Indianapolis.
Statewide, though, we did jump 17 spots in 2 years, and the state is attributing a lot of that to the science of reading push. One thing they caution us when reporting on NAEP scores is don't let anybody take credit for one specific policy for increases or decreases, especially because in this case, part of the reason we jumped is because most other states slid backwards. So it wasn't a statistically significant jump, but it has been a big deal for the state.
And the other thing I'd say in terms of measuring whether or not this choice environment has actually helped us, the state has routinely changed benchmarks so often that it's hard to measure historically from the beginning of the charter school movement in Indiana to now whether it's actually made us better or worse, or there's no difference. So we had the I-STEP a few years ago. Then there was an I-STEP testing error or some sort. This is before Alex and I's time here. And then we decided to go to the iLearn, and then COVID hit. So then we decided to pause the iLearn. We had school ratings at one point, and then we decided to not use school ratings. Some schools are still boasting about their school ratings, even though they're no longer they're included in some of their websites, even though it's no longer really valid. So it's really hard to say. Since 2002, we came on board. There are some studies people will cite that say charter schools are outperforming IPS schools, but there's also in academia a large portion. I mean, it's not large portion. There are some academics that take issues with those specific studies and the way that they were done. So and when I hear those studies cited, it's often a part of that study, but not the entire study itself, which is also something I'm looking at. What I like to look at is simply the current iLearn results, the current iRead results for 3rd grade, and graduation rates without waivers. So the percentage of kids they graduate without giving And as an aggregate, independent charters do perform better in iLearn and I believe iRead than IPS schools. So that's one thing that I've done myself that I feel confident in saying. Again, it's an aggregate though, so you can't, just because you go to a charter doesn't mean you are better performing than the nearest IPS school, but on average, they do perform better on like the most recent state test results, which might be changed in a few years anyways. It's very frustrating to measure, as you can imagine.
Yeah, I'm sure. Well, and I guess there's also kind of some intangibles that don't fall into that, like socialization skills and some of those other things that, are sort of occurring when you're in school that don't necessarily come out in test scores, right? So like how well you get along with how open to other ideas are you, things like that. Because that's what I guess I worry about with charter schools. It's like everybody starts to slice and dice into such small little pockets that you miss the opportunities to interact with the broader group. And I don't know how you'd measure that, or if that's a positive, negative, or whatever. But
Yeah, it's not a perfect measure, but one thing I've noticed is that there's a lot of indie charters that have really high rates of absenteeism. I haven't crunched those data the way Amelia has, but I have just noticed when I'm picking through absenteeism data, like that's a lot higher than, the local district school.
interesting.
I also wanted to ask if you guys look at information on higher education attainment after high school. And, I don't want to stay in this dichotomy of, IPS versus charter schools. Are there other factors that you see influencing, students attaining higher education? I know too, Indiana also has a really great commission for higher education, like the 21st Century Scholar Program is really influential in helping lower income students go to college as well. So I'm just interested, in just the factors that you guys see, even with the public versus charter school, but outside of that as well, that's influencing students.
Yeah, that's a great question. I just shared a story that I did answering this, kind of examining this. I talked to this young man, Mike, who was such a great interviewee, but he went to Shortridge and he explained as a first generation 21st century scholar how lost he was at IU. He got into the business school. He went just because everyone said it's the IU business school, you go. And he kind of described it as like touring IU is like looking through a glass at the zoo because it was so foreign to him and he dropped out. So I did kind of grill IPS on you're claiming that you're graduating all these kids. You're claiming that college, going rates are higher than they've ever been, but are they completing college, or are we falsely sending kids to college that perhaps either aren't prepared or maybe it actually is not the right path? So I examined that in the whole context of the state's big push for college completion. We had what prompted me to do this story was UIndy announcing in partnership with IPS that they were going to, I'm not sorry, not UIndy, IUIndy now, in partnership with IPS that they were going to now automatically admit all IPS kids with a certain GPA. Which on its hindsight, I guess as reporters were trained to find the bad in everything, but on hindsight, I it's great, but are we just rubber stamping all of these students to enter into college and to accrue debt that they're either not prepared for or it's just not meant for them? Maybe a trade school is meant for them instead. So that kind of looks at college completion rates, I think just for IPS, but I think I took a statewide step back of it as a whole as well. And that's a problem everywhere and a problem for, I'm sure, charters as well. I don't think I looked at charters in that piece.
And I think the state's trying to address it with the new diplomas that are supposed to catch students early and put them on a track. People don't like that term very much, but essentially it was, do you want to go to college? You need to do these things. Do you want to go do a career? You need to do these things, which include some work experience in high school. Or do you want to go into the military, which is declining, I guess, as an option for Indiana students. So I think the hope there is to combat some of the disengagement that we've been seeing among teenagers, who the sense of hopelessness after COVID, which I think affected a lot of students.
Have you gals seen anything at other places you've been that are good policies, programs that you've seen that could help Indiana?
You don't want to model yourselves off Vegas. That's the main thing we want to say.
Not about the
Well,
bottom.
no, Indiana, we've both pointed this out before, is 4 in 5 Indiana students can read, but it's usually framed as 1 in 5 can't read, and it's treated like a 5-alarm fire, and maybe it should be. But back where we were in Vegas, 2/3 of students couldn't read, and there was none of that motivation
Wow.
to address it. So I think we're doing much better than Nevada. Massachusetts maybe has some things we might model, Amelia.
That's cool. Like, I started in Massachusetts, which I didn't realize was like #1 in the nation, frequently touted as for public education, right? And then I went straight from a top performing state to the lowest of the low performing states and the territories, I think, US territories as well. And so that was like night and day. And I kind of see Indiana as a middle of the pack state, I think, because of the culture that we have of like the Midwest culture and like strong family value culture that we have, that Nevada doesn't necessarily. They have more of a Wild West kind of free range kind of culture. That's how the state was founded. So I think in terms of Massachusetts, they were so obsessed with metrics, so obsessed with data. The State Department of Education had a dashboard of all of this data: teacher ethnicity, teacher turnover, probably teacher licensure. You could just go and as a reporter find instantly. They were very hyper focused on test scores, right? So it is like a very union, it's a weird dichotomy because it's a very union strong state and very heavy Democratic state, but they were also very hyper focused on test scores. So test scores came out, the Department of Education had all of the education reporters around the state in a press call, and you can just grill the commissioner on, well, my city, Lowell, didn't do this well this year. Like, what do we need to do to improve? And so it's very, very hyper fixated on performance as well, which is, it's kind of odd. You would think that in a union strong state, there's not that, but it was, I think it was a mixture that worked, honestly. I have yet to encounter a state that's that fixated. I think here we're just kind of like, well, let's try this and let's do that, and innovation, but there's no actual like solid plan. Or in terms of like opening and closing schools in Indianapolis, there's no, okay, this is the number of schools we need for the number of kids we need. There's not really, it's more about like trying new ideas, and it's not so much about like rote data, this is what we need. So I think probably some more decisions grounded in data would be good.
Yeah. Well, Amelia and Alec, I want to thank you for talking with us. We're running to the end of our hour. So, and I think this is a discussion that we could probably go on for 2 or 3 more hours. There's a lot of interest and passion behind all this stuff, and I really appreciate what you're bringing to us. So, on your behalves, we'll be making a donation to the Mary Rigg Neighborhood Center, a thriving community resource in Southwest Indianapolis that provides youth enrichment services, including after-school and summer day camp programming, and supports families seeking help, hope, and better opportunities. So many thanks to you guys, and we're happy to do that in your honor. So, and then I always end the meeting with a quote from the One America sign, and this one was particularly germane in my profession as an architect. So, what is the easiest building to lift? It's a lighthouse. So,
very good.
with that, I will adjourn the meeting, and thank you all again very much.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.